Nestled in the lush hills of Malibu, Nick Nulty's former home, a sprawling Tudor-style mansion, is a sight to behold. But those who've stepped through its doors claim it holds more than architectural charm. They speak of whispers in the hallways, shadows that stretch unnaturally long, and a chilling presence that seems to watch, always watch. Nick Nulty, known for his rugged roles and intense screen presence, lived in the house for decades, often dismissing the rumors of paranormal activity as Hollywood gossip. Yet, those who visited him told a different story. In 2017, the house hit the market. Sarah Collins, a seasoned real estate agent, took on the sale, excited by the prestige such a property promised. During her first solo visit, she walked through the mansion with her camera, documenting its grandeur. But as she reviewed the footage that evening, her excitement curdled into unease. In the mirrored reflection of the foyer's grand chandelier, a figure loomed, a man with hollowed eyes and a gaping mouth, staring directly at the camera. She rewound the video again and again, but the figure never vanished. Sarah rationalized it as a trick of the light. After all, the house was old, with creaks and drafts that played tricks on the senses. 2 weeks later, Sarah hosted an open house. The turnout was small, and as the sun began to set, she found herself alone. At least she thought she was. In the living room, she heard the faint sound of a man humming. The tune was low and uneven, like someone humming to themselves in another room. "Hello," she called out, her voice trembling. The humming stopped. As she approached the living room doorway, she froze. The grand piano, which had been covered with a heavy velvet cloth, was now uncovered. The piano keys moved, pressing down in slow succession, though no one sat at the bench. The front door slammed shut with a force that rattled the windows. Heart pounding, Sarah ran outside, leaving her purse, phone, and dignity behind. Curiosity got the better of her. Sarah contacted a local historian, Tom Hastings, who specialized in documenting Los Angeles folklore. Tom uncovered a dark piece of the home's history. Before the house was built in the 1920s, the land was the site of an asylum for the mentally ill. A fire had consumed the facility in 1908, killing dozens of patients and staff. Eyewitnesses claimed to have seen people clawing at the barred windows as flames engulfed the building. Sarah listened, her skin crawling. "But why would they haunt the house now?" she asked. Tom shook his head. "It's not the house they haunt, it's the land. And whoever lives on it stirs them up." Despite the terrifying stories, the house eventually found a buyer, a young tech entrepreneur named Michael Reed. He moved in with his girlfriend, Anna, brushing off Sarah's warnings as superstition. 2 months later, Michael fled the property, leaving everything behind. He refused to talk about what happened, but neighbors later shared strange accounts. Michael standing on his front lawn at 3 a.m., screaming at someone or something invisible. Anna's frantic cries for help echoing through the night, though no one was seen entering or leaving the house. The final straw came when Anna's childhood teddy bear, packed away in a storage box, appeared on the bed one morning, its button eyes replaced with tiny shards of glass. Today, Nick Nulty's house sits abandoned. Windows cracked, ivy creeping up its walls. It is a relic of Hollywood opulence turned nightmare. Locals say the house grows louder with every passing year. The hum of a piano in the middle of the night, the shadow of a man pacing on the second floor, and the distant, agonized screams of those trapped long before the mansion ever stood. Few dare to visit, even fewer stay. Months after Michael Reed's hasty departure, the house remained unsold, the stories of terror branding it untouchable. But one person saw potential where others saw fear. Jessica Moore, a filmmaker known for her raw documentaries, decided to make the house the centerpiece of her next project. She didn't believe in ghosts. For her, it was all psychology, a place imbued with fear that fed on people's imaginations. Jessica and her small crew arrived one crisp autumn morning, armed with cameras, recording devices, and enough equipment to document every creak and groan the house might produce. She was confident, bold. By nightfall, that confidence would begin to waver. As the crew set up in the dining room, Jessica interviewed Tom Hastings, the historian who had helped Sarah. He recounted the asylum fire in vivid detail, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. "There's one thing I didn't share before," he admitted, his voice dropping. "The night of the fire, survivors claimed to hear something, a voice among the flames. They said it sounded like a woman calling their names." Jessica's cameraman, Eric, smirked. "Spooky, but not exactly evidence." Tom's eyes darkened. "You don't have to believe me, but when you hear it, you'll know." Eric laughed it off, but hours later, as he reviewed the footage, his smirk vanished. Through the static of the audio recording, a faint voice emerged, distorted and chilling. "Eric." The crew explored deeper into the house, eventually venturing into the basement. The air grew colder with each step, and the smell of damp earth and mildew was almost suffocating. In the far corner, behind a stack of rotting wooden crates, they found a door. It was small and iron, its edges rusted. None of the house's plans mentioned a basement room, let alone this door. "Did you know about this?" Jessica asked Tom, but he shook his head. Eric grabbed a crowbar and pried it open. The door screeched, revealing a narrow passage lined with stone. The air that escaped felt alive, heavy, almost oppressive. "Let's check it out," Jessica said, her voice trembling slightly, though she tried to mask it with determination. The passage led to a circular chamber, its walls covered in jagged carvings. The symbols were unfamiliar, angular, and crude, as though scratched in desperation. In the center of the room sat a stone pedestal, its surface stained dark as though from old blood. "This isn't in any of the records," Tom whispered, his voice barely audible. "Maybe it's just an old wine cellar," Jessica suggested, though the words felt hollow even as she said them. Eric reached out to touch the carvings. The moment his fingers brushed the stone, the entire house seemed to groan. Above them, a sudden, deafening crash shook the foundation. Rushing back upstairs, they found the dining room in chaos. The heavy oak table had split down the middle, and the chandelier hung by a single chain, swaying as though something unseen had pushed it. "Eric, what the hell did you touch?" Jessica snapped, her voice edged with panic. But Eric didn't respond. He stood frozen, his face pale, his eyes fixed on something none of them could see. "Eric!" Jessica grabbed his arm, and he flinched violently, stumbling backward. I heard her," he stammered. "She was right behind me." Tom's face drained of color. "Who?" Eric's voice dropped to a whisper. "She said her name was Eleanor, and she wants us to leave." The room fell silent, save for the faint creak of the floorboards overhead. Jessica, determined to keep filming, instructed the crew to set up a stationary camera in the hallway outside the basement. "We're here to find answers, not run away at the first weird noise," she insisted, though her hands trembled as she adjusted her mic. The footage they captured that night would never be aired. At exactly 3:13 a.m., the camera picked up movement, a shadowy figure gliding across the hallway, its form distorted and jerking unnaturally, as though it didn't quite belong. Moments later, a loud scratching noise erupted, accompanied by faint whispers, too garbled to understand. When Jessica reviewed the footage, her heart stopped. On the wall next to the basement door, fresh markings had appeared, carved deep into the wood. They spelled out a single word: stay. What began as a skeptic's investigation was unraveling into a descent into terror. And the house, as if feeding on their fear, was just getting started. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. By the third night, the house felt different. Jessica and her crew had moved most of their equipment to the second floor, hoping to capture more activity. But the air was thick with something they couldn't define, an oppressive weight that pressed on their chests and made it hard to breathe. Jessica was determined to maintain control, even as the others grew visibly unnerved. "We've got to stay the course," she told them. "We're close to something big." Close wasn't the right word. They were in the middle of it. One of the bedrooms had an entire wall of mirrored panels, a relic from the house's glamorous Hollywood days. Jessica decided to use it as a focal point for the investigation, setting up a high-resolution camera and several motion sensors. As the crew adjusted the equipment, Eric froze. "Do you see that?" he whispered. In the reflection, something moved, a figure standing at the far end of the room, barely visible. It was tall, its outline flickering like a distorted film reel. Jessica turned quickly, but the space behind her was empty. When she looked back at the mirror, the figure was closer. Eric reached for the camera, desperate to capture the image. But as he adjusted the focus, the figure's face became clear. It was featureless except for its mouth, a grotesque grin that stretched far too wide. And then it moved. The mirrored surface rippled like water, and the figure stepped forward, reaching toward them. The motion sensors blared, but the sound was drowned out by the crew's screams as they fled the room, slamming the door behind them. Tom Hastings, pale and visibly shaken, suggested they leave immediately, but Jessica refused. "This is the evidence we've been waiting for," she insisted. "We're not investigating anymore," Tom snapped. "We're provoking." As they argued, a loud bang echoed through the house. It was followed by a deep, guttural groan, the kind that seemed to vibrate the very walls. "It came from upstairs," Eric whispered. Against their better judgment, they climbed to the third floor. There, at the end of the hallway, was a door they hadn't noticed before. Its surface was scratched and scarred, the wood splintered as though someone or something had clawed at it relentlessly. "This wasn't here yesterday," Anna, the sound technician, said, her voice barely audible. Jessica pushed the door open. Inside, the air was freezing, their breath visible as they stepped into the dark, narrow space. The room was empty save for a single chair in the center, its back to them. As they approached, the chair creaked, slowly turning to face them. No one was sitting in it, but on the wall behind it, words had been scrawled in a jagged, almost childlike script. "You brought her back." The team stumbled back downstairs, the words etched into their minds. Jessica was shaking now, her earlier confidence crumbling. "We need to finish this," she said, her voice cracking. "We need to go back to the basement." "No," Tom said firmly. "You don't understand. If you go back there, you're opening something that should stay closed." But Jessica wouldn't be deterred. She felt as though she was being compelled to return to the stone chamber. When they reached the iron door, they found it wide open. A faint light glowed from within, though no one had left anything lit. Inside the chamber, the air was thicker than before, almost unbreathable. The carvings on the walls seemed to shimmer, the dark stains on the pedestal fresh and wet. And then they heard it. A low, rasping voice, speaking from everywhere and nowhere at once. "She's here," it said. The light flickered, and suddenly, the chamber wasn't empty. Figures stood along the walls, shadowy, indistinct, yet undeniably there. Their eyes glowed faintly, watching, unblinking. Jessica stepped forward, drawn to the pedestal. Her hand hovered over it, trembling. "Jessica, don't," Eric pleaded, but his voice felt far away. The moment her hand touched the cold stone, the house seemed to erupt. Walls trembled, and the floor beneath them cracked as though the earth itself was splitting open. The shadows surged forward, their faces, if they could be called faces, twisting in anger and hunger. And then everything went dark. Weeks later, the camera equipment was found abandoned in the house. The footage captured up to the moment the shadows lunged, then cut to static. Jessica, Eric, and the rest of the crew were never seen again. Neighbors reported hearing screams that night, though none dared approach. By morning, the house was silent once more, its doors and windows shut tight, as though it had swallowed its victims whole. Locals say the house is angrier now, its whispers louder, its shadows bolder. And in the dead of night, if you stand close enough, you can still hear Jessica's voice, pleading from within. "Help me." Jessica's disappearance sparked a media frenzy. News outlets speculated on everything from a tragic accident to a bizarre hoax. Authorities conducted a thorough search of the house and its grounds but found no sign of Jessica or her crew. The official report listed them as missing under unexplained circumstances. The house itself was sealed off. Police tape fluttered in the wind, a weak barrier against whatever lurked inside. But locals knew better. The whispers started immediately. Neighbors claimed to hear Jessica's voice late at night, calling out for help, sometimes accompanied by frantic footsteps that never seemed to lead anywhere. Tom Hastings, racked with guilt, couldn't let it go. "We didn't just investigate that house," he told a friend over drinks one night. "We woke it up." 1 month later, a new player entered the scene. A self-proclaimed paranormal expert, Dr. Evelyn Clark, announced that she intended to confront the entity within Nolte's house. Her reputation was built on exposing haunted locations as mere urban legends, and she saw this as her magnum opus. Accompanied by her assistant, Matt, Evelyn arrived armed with state-of-the-art equipment, thermal cameras, EMF detectors, and audio recorders. The world watched as she live-streamed her investigation, her bravado drawing tens of thousands of viewers. "This house has a story," Evelyn began, standing in front of the grand facade. "But I don't believe in ghosts. What we're dealing with here is likely residual energy explainable through science." The stream started smoothly. Evelyn led her audience through the house, pointing out its architectural details while debunking the paranormal claims. She explained away the carvings in the basement as prank and dismissed the mirror footage as pareidolia, the human tendency to see faces where there are none. But as night fell, the tone of the broadcast shifted. Evelyn and Matt descended into the basement, their footsteps echoing ominously. The iron door was still ajar, just as Jessica's team had left it. "Let's see what all the fuss is about," Evelyn said, forcing a smile. Inside the chamber, the air was colder than they expected, their breath visible in the faint light of their flashlights. Evelyn's live-stream chat exploded with comments. "What's that on the wall? I saw something move. Get out of there." Evelyn dismissed the hysteria, but Matt seemed less sure. "Dr. Clark, this place feels wrong," he said, his voice shaking. Before Evelyn could respond, the audio recorder picked up a sound. It was faint at first, a rhythmic tapping, like fingers drumming on stone. "Is someone there?" Evelyn called out, her voice steady but her hands trembling. The tapping stopped, replaced by a whisper. It was low and indistinct at first, but as the live viewers strained to make sense of it, the words became clearer. "Why did you come back?" The chat erupted in all caps as viewers pleaded for Evelyn to leave. But she pressed on, pointing her thermal camera at the walls. The screen showed faint handprints glowing bright orange, scattered haphazardly across the stone. "Residual heat signatures," Evelyn muttered, though her voice lacked conviction. The handprints began to multiply. They spread across the walls, down to the floor, and up to the ceiling, moving like something alive. The whispers grew louder, overlapping until they formed a chilling chant. "She brought them. She brought them. She brought them." The camera feed flickered, the live stream glitching as viewers watched in horror. In the center of the frame, a shadow began to form, not cast by the flashlights, but standing independently in the middle of the room. Matt dropped his camera. "We need to go. Now." Before they could move, the shadow stretched toward them, the room plunging into an unnatural darkness that seemed to swallow their flashlights. The stream's audio distorted, capturing a blood-curdling scream before the feed cut to black. The next morning, the live stream was the top trending topic across social media. Millions of viewers had witnessed Evelyn's investigation and her apparent disappearance. Conspiracy theories ran wild. Some claimed it was an elaborate hoax. Others insisted it was real. When authorities entered the house, they found the basement empty. Evelyn and Matt were gone, just like Jessica's crew. But there was something new. On the pedestal in the chamber, someone or something had left behind a single item. It was Evelyn's audio recorder. The device was playing on a loop, its battery impossibly full. The message was clear. "She's here now, and she's waiting for you." To this day, the house remains sealed. But late at night, brave souls who approach it claim to hear faint, distorted voices calling out from the basement. And sometimes, if they're foolish enough to look into the windows, they swear they see figures staring back. The question remains, who or what is truly trapped in that house? And what happens if it ever gets out? Months passed, and the house sat silent, its windows dark and unyielding. Locals avoided it entirely, and even thrill-seekers dared not approach. Yet curiosity simmered, and the recordings from Evelyn's livestream became a macabre sensation online. But one night, the silence broke. Neighbors awoke to see the house ablaze not with fire, but with an eerie, pulsating light. The glow seeped from every window, accompanied by faint whispers that carried on the wind. When authorities arrived, the house was cold and dark again, no signs of damage. Inside, they found something new etched into the walls. "We are awake." A week later, the first reports came in. Strange phenomena began spreading to nearby homes: phantom voices, shadowy figures, unexplained chills. It was as though the house's curse had spilled beyond its walls, infecting the neighborhood. And then, one by one, people began to disappear. The authorities boarded up Nolte's house for good, but the whispers didn't stop. The house, now an urban legend, still waits patient, watching, its hunger growing. And some say if you listen closely at night, you can still hear them. Jessica, Evelyn, and all the others, pleading, trapped forever within the walls of something that will never let go. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. Any coincidences with real events or characters are accidental.